Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tamer Gouda. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our second in a series of Lunch and Learn webinars to talk about different issues that we are dealing with in the new world that we are all in. Thank you all for coming once again. For those that are not chamber members, a little bit of chamber business before we get started with our presentations. Right now, we are running a special on chamber memberships. We are running a 50% special. So if you are not a member, it is no better time to sign up than now. You're pretty much getting 6 weeks for free. We usually don't run this special till July. So it's half off your membership with no admin fee. If you know anyone that wants to become a member and get the most out of this chamber like all our members do, please have them contact me or anybody on the board and we'd be happy to help them out. The more members involved with the chamber, the more access you have to other businesses to work with, network with, and grow your business, because that's why we are all here, to grow our businesses. So thank you all for attending. And we are going to get started with our presentations. The first one up is going to be George. George, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing?
Quick, please hold your questions till the end. If you have something, use the chat feature and we will call on you when it is time. Sorry, George, go ahead.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. I think you hopefully can see my screen. Thanks, Gary. Anyway, when we were originally writing this thing, we were like, return to work after COVID-19. And then, it kind of dawned on us that we're going to have to return to work during COVID-19. So we're going to need to, take our employees and bring them back to the office and get them reacclimated to working from the office. And, we got to prepare for that. And, we got to do some checklists and provide guidance. And we also got to work in the office space and the technologies that we use that we could help somebody transition back to the office. And since it's during the quarantine, we need to be prepared and get the slide change. We need to get our employees prepared so we can start working from the office safely. I'm not sure what's going to come out down the road, but at some point, I foresee a lot of lawsuits coming down the road because of you maybe come back to work and I got sick and all this other stuff. So us as employers, we need to protect our employees. So at your office, we need to set up, if you have one person or two people, it's one thing, but if you're in a large office and you got employees under your proxy, you may want to set up a task force or a point person to manage your transition back. You want to communicate with your staff that these are the things that we're doing to protect you. And it's important that you communicate that you're making these efforts today to the best of the CDC and the health standards, that if something happens to this employee and it happens at your office, you could say that you took the best practices that was available at the time to protect the employee. With that, a schedule. If I bring everybody back to the office once and one person gets it, I need to worry about the entire office being shut down. So having a return to office schedule, saying you work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you work Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and kind of rotate my shifts around the office to protect the employees. So in case somebody gets sick on one shift, I don't lose the entire office. We still want to make the work from home policies available to the employee. If the employees get sick or a family member gets sick, we don't want them in our office. You want to leave them home. So still you want to promote an ongoing work from home policy, and you want to review it and update it with the changes that come out with the government standards and what the health organizations are recommending. Then we want to establish safety practices in the office. Everyone still should wear a mask. Everyone should wash their hands. Common areas like lunchrooms and stuff like that, you don't want employees, gathering in the lunchroom, get them all working in individual cubes and offices. If you got a close work environment, we do want to look at moving the employees and separating them so they're not sitting on top of each other. maybe as you work out your shifts, as you look at your office layout, is that all right, you, and you work these days, and then you skip a desk and they work the other day. So basically you only fill up half the office and you alternate desks to keep the social distancing practices around. And then once I said it a little bit earlier, if anybody in that feels sick or is a family member that feels sick or has symptoms, and this has symptoms, things a little controversy, because usually if you have symptoms, you've been spreading it a while as it is. So you do want to make sure, you take the precautions. You can work from home, continue to work from home, and go from there. For those in the service industry, when you're serving food or, restaurants, bars, they're going to open up last. But if you do in that predicament, start looking at how you're going to open your establishment to conform to these rules. Check with your local health officials and health screening recommendations. We offer a thermal imaging camera that will tell the person's temperature and a picture of the person, and we can set it up at the entrance of your establishment, and it will record a picture of the person's face and their temperature, so you can actually have a little backlog or a little log of who walked in the establishment and what the temperature was. It's a cool device. It's pretty neat. But once again, checking people's temperatures is a big thing right now, and we'll go from there. You need to establish an open line of communication for your employees. You don't want your employees feel they're sheltered. They're absolute communications, and if they're uncomfortable about coming in, and you just can't fire them. So you need to open a line of communications and work with your employees so you can keep them going. And also communicate your employees what steps you took to ensure their safety. Say, hey, we got a mask policy, we got a wash your hands policy, we separated the office, we put, like you go to the local Wawa, they got the guards up to protect the employees. So those are things that you could do to help protect your employees and communicate that this is what you're doing. Your office space. Basically, put up some basic signs as you enter the establishment. Masks must be worn. We practice social distancing here. The whole thing is just, once again, assure your employees that you're taking everything you know of that you can do and take care of. Do a thorough office cleaning before you reopen the doors to the employees. Not sure what happened in the office beforehand, but send somebody in, do a thorough cleaning and de-virusing of the office, and turn around and say, hey, my employees, I had the office completely cleaned. It's got to be cleaned on a regular basis. And then, let your employees know you're doing that. We spoke about it a little bit earlier, but, ensure your office seating for your employees abide by the social distancing. Use scheduling. Have these people work from home, have these people work from the office, and flip-flop them. So schedule your people to keep your social distancing. Traffic patterns in the office. Depending on how big your office is and what's going on, you come in this door, you go out that door. If you got to go to the bathroom, here's the procedures. Here's the procedures that you got to do when you use the bathroom. Make sure, once again, you're protecting your employees. Establish guidelines for visitors entering your office. The biggest thing is, if you have strangers coming into your office and you know nothing about them, and as part of your normal course of business, you should establish a log of who they came in, when they came in, who they seen. The trick is, if that person or the person they seen comes down with the virus, you might be able to do this tracing they're talking about, and you'll aid in the tracing of the disease if it gets into your office and spreads. Also, the other thing about the office space is create a reclosure plan. If a second wave does hit, and it's as bad as the earlier pandemic, the second wave is going to kick our butt more than the first wave did. So start putting in the back of your head, if this goes into lockdown again, spend a little time planning today, so when it happens in the fall, we'll be ready for it, or it might be next spring. But create a little plan to get an understanding of what we went through in the past 2 months, and this way we're ready for it if and when it happens again. Technology checklist. We all sent our people home in a rush. That they're working from home and they're using their laptops and monitors or home computers or work computers. So we need to get things together that when we go into this planning for the next closure, certain things we do, we need to evaluate the technologies that we deployed during this crisis. Something as simple as this Zoom meeting that we're using. We need to evaluate it and see if I want to continue to use it. We use Microsoft Teams in our office. We're a Microsoft reseller. With Microsoft Teams, every morning at 7:45, we have a huddle. All the technicians and myself get online. We talk about what happened yesterday, what's happening today, any problems, any resources that they need, anything they need to purchase for a client, or, so we have this morning huddle, allows us to get together. We used to do it just as a casual stand-up thing in the office, and it usually was like whenever we all got here. And now this became like a formal thing, so it's actually pretty good. Talk about the service providers that you're using that are providing service to your business. Something as simple as your internet bandwidth. Everybody remoting into the office. Can we get more bandwidth for your office? So those are things that you need to provide or look at for services. Do you want employees to continue to work from home? If you do, it's probably a good thing until this thing's done with. And start, audit the tech that you're using to do that with, whether it's VPN tunnels, go to Meeting, go to My PC, and start looking at the cost of that stuff and evaluating other ways you can do it and, make it a little more profitable. Face it, if you're using like go to My PC, it's a costly chunk of money a month. Or if you get a VPN tunnel and using the secure remote desktop, that's a cheaper way to go. So as we're going through, now obviously when this mess happened, we sent everybody home. And some of them took computers, some of them took laptops, printers. Run an audit of all the equipment in your office, make sure you still own it. Make sure it's still in your possession or still in your control. Because it's a good possibility you might lose a PC or two or three. So you want to do some extra, run an audit and make sure you got everything that you own that should be there. Document the list of employees who got what equipment. Sally took her computer home and her printer. Let's have it, we did it in a rush, but spend a little time right now to document who's got what equipment and where it's at. And if they are using the home computer, should we get them an office computer for their home? Do we want to have, continue to use somebody's personal computer for work without having the safeguards in place to protect the network and your personal office information? Do a gap analysis. We all sat back in the past 2 months and said, oh, I would like to do this. Oh, I'd like to do that. We need to do this, and we should do that. It's a good time while we're a little low period right now before you officially open up to try to figure out where these gaps are. So when the time happens, we're going to be in a better place for the next incident. Schedule review your disaster recovery or business continuity plan. I know I've been teaching and talking about disaster recovery and business continuity. I never talked about a pandemic before. I always talked about your office burning down. You're having a flood in your office and your server gets wet. Your building can't be occupied because the pole got hit outside and there's no internet connection. I never thought about, everybody stays home. So let's reevaluate and redo your disaster recovery and business continuity plan for a pandemic, for everybody working from home. Whoever's doing your main thing, let's schedule a business continuity testing. Do a little testing now. Let's make sure everything's working, make some changes and tweaks, and hopefully it will work out better for you. Establish guidelines for conducting group meetings. Face-to-face has always been a way. Everybody piles into the conference room and spends an hour talking about whatever you want to talk about. But let's maybe continue doing that electronically. Even though they're in the office, you do a group meeting in their office cubes versus all huddling into a conference room and worried about them getting sick in a conference room, where you can kind of keep them in the cubes, keep them isolated, and keep that isolation going. Talk a little about your clients. Depending what type of clientele you have, if you got walk-in traffic, God bless you, good luck. But if you got clients coming into your building, whether it's salespeople or people you buy from you and they're regular clients, review each client's current state, get an understanding of where they're at. What services you provide to them and how you can continue to provide these services and enhance or improve the way you've done it in the past 2 months in the future. As your office reopens, if you're a law firm, you got people coming into your office to do closings. We need some reopening plans for this to happen. Are you going to let anybody walk in off the street to sit down at a closing? Or are you going to say, hey, let's break this closing up into 2 conference rooms. Sellers in this room, the buyers in this room, and we keep them separated and we keep them away from your employees using those plastic guards and stuff. So kind of redesign your conference rooms in your attorney's office. So literally you could have a closing, sign all your documents, do everything you need to do, but keep everybody away from each other so you don't have a closing and then 2 weeks later you find out everybody in that closing was sick. Develop and conduct an action review with your clients. Basically what I'm trying to say here is if something happens, and we talked about the logbook earlier when people come into your room, if something happens, somebody gets sick at your office, you go back in the logbook and you can say, here's the people they were in contact with, have this action review. So you can sit back and say, hey, 2 weeks ago, she had these 4 closings at this law firm. Let's contact those 4 people and let's sit back and say, all right, is everybody healthy? When contact tracing becomes more and more prolific, you're going to find out people are going to be asking you for these things. Once again, we talked a little before, is plan for the future. We don't know what's going to happen in a month, 6 months, or a year. So keep your business continuity plan, intact, and let's plan for the future where we can sit back and have an understanding of what's happening in the world. Pay attention to news, pay attention to the CDC. I don't want to get political, but try to stay to the science and the facts and try to keep away from the rhetoric from either side. But we got to plan, we got to be smart. We want to live, we want to thrive, we want to make money, we want to continue to grow our businesses. Some things we need to prepare for, one shot. Develop and implement procedures and for signs and symptoms of employees and daily upon arrival. In other words, check your employees' temperature before they walk in. Get an understanding of what's happening with their family and their lives. Is your kid sick? Is your wife sick? Your spouse sick? So we want to check the signs and symptoms of our employees on a daily basis. We want to interview them. Say, hey, anybody sick in your household? Anybody sick at home? Oh, they are. Get out of here. Don't even come in. Institute plan for the future. We talked about the plan for the future, so I'm not going to go back into it again. And then this is a grab and go approach. If we got to go back to work from home again, understanding, this is what your employees need to go home with. So we didn't have times to plan for it before, but now let's sit back. We got to send everybody home. What does that employee need? Get it in place. And if we get shut down again, they just got to grab and go, and they can work from home almost instantaneously. Review your current disaster recovery plan with your clients and your employees. This is our plan. If we get shut down again, you do this, 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 and this. And we tell our clients, this is how we're going to deliver our services. And then create a reclosure plan, because if the second wave hits, we're going to need to reclose. There's no getting around it. It's just going to happen. In the post-pandemic office, even though I'm talking a year from now, you still want to promote teleworking. If there's a real estate agent that does commercial real estate, I'm going to apologize in advance, but I think this teleworking thing is going to take off. If people continue to do their job productively, it's a good shot that we're going to say a lot of commercial real estate is going to become available, because why do I need to have 400 offices in a high-rise building for my company when I can have 300 of them work from home? So try to promote teleworking. It's not a bad thing. consider making it permanent. Is kind of leading it. You know, you got these employees, you can track what they're doing, you're understanding it's secure, they meet all the things that we're talking about. Consider making it a permanent solution. Reconsider travel policies. If you got an office that you know, get everybody together, they fly in and have a meeting. You know, this is simple as the one that happened in Boston, what brought our troubles right into the Little Solar area. And then an initial outbreak of the pandemic, this kid just was going to Boston for a normal meeting. And all of a sudden he brings this junk into his household, and then it spreads in the Little Solar area. So this is real important that, you know, maybe let's reconsider those travel policies. Do we need to have everybody in a meeting, or should we just do a Teams thing? Something as simple as, you know, when we do a Chamber of Commerce thing where we all get together and promote our businesses, we all sit in this big room, we may want to look at doing that virtually. That's all I got. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen. And who's up next?
Thanks,
Or any
George.
questions?
Again, if anyone has any questions, just take note of it. And after all the presenters are finished, we will turn to questions. Just leave me a message in the chat box and we will call on you. Next up is Sherilyn. Sherilyn, the floor is yours.
Just want to mention that the following slides are not legal advice, and they're from Society of Human Resources and some of the regulations that are right in place at this time. Here's how you can get in touch with me. So getting employees back, consider, you know, a very positive step and welcome your employees back. Let your team know that you're happy to have them back. You want to also make sure you're detailing any changes you've made, and George just mentioned some of that, and it's just understanding how and what it's going to be like now that they go back into the office. There's a lot of changes now that have been made, and all the things that are going to allow them to be safe. And that's really explaining what employees need to do also. So there's going to be protocols, and so from the social distancing and everything that needs to be taking place. But it's very important, and as George said earlier, communication. So letting your employees know where to also direct their questions. Each company is different, and they need to know where do they go if they have these questions as they're coming back. So that's very important. So healthy operations is really what I call a return to work guide for employees. And we want to have something, I don't know if you can see this, but something in place that has, you know, all the return to work things that are important. What will you do as the employer? What do I do as the employee? Can I continue to work from home? As George said, a lot of them are going to be, employees will be trying to work from home, or their employers are going to have their employees work from home as much as they can. And of course, the question is, it's safe. So have something in place that I couldn't put on the screen, but some type of I said, you know, welcome back, some type of in place that will make them feel healthy about the operations, frequently asked questions. You've got something at the end there that also, in this one that says, you know, changes you may see at work. Will I continue to have in-person meetings? And it's important right now because some of the corporations are, for example, you know, some of these larger corporations that have like food service in place. How are they going to do these things? Is there going to be online ordering now? Do I need to go back on certain staggered shifts, all that? So all kinds of things are in place. So communicate, have the things in place, have something tangible to give to your employees. So who keeps teleworking, who doesn't? And as we just mentioned, and George, many companies expanding remote work policies, but this depends on the life cycle of the company. We're definitely seeing companies moving towards expanding remote work policies. Some were already in places, let's just say like a payroll company. Some of their employees were already, there's one out of Chicago-based payroll company that already had their employees, half of them were working from home. And then for them during this time wasn't a difficult transition. So some organizations, it'll be easier for them. And some, depending on, you know, the climate of that type of work, are not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to get some of these employees back in. So it's really important that these organizations, or you as an organization or company, that you have the leadership teams assess all these scenarios. And you want to talk to your employees and find out how they're feeling. What are their needs? How are they doing through all this? It's communication, finding out. So you want to know how they're feeling during this time, and how can they work from home? Can they continue to do it in the manner that you need them to? So those are very important. And also, so important is when two employees with a similar role are treated, they need to be treated the same. So be very careful that you're not treating one differently than the other, and that your job descriptions are in place, that are continue to be in place during this time. It's very important. So the creation of new human resource policies, we all know now, we've got all these new policies in place. So employers must create new flexible policies, that incorporate the paid time off, the sick leave. Now we have that Family First Corona Relief Act. There's posters now that need to be in place. So I think you've probably all seen this, but you need to get all those up to date. They need to be available. And if the employee is not in the workplace, then you need to send them those, because they may not be there to physically see these posters. You need to still make them aware of them. Businesses will need to learn how to handle the requests for accommodations now. So we have the ADA involved in all this. So you got family medical leave, you've got these new policies in place, you have ADA. So there's a lot of laws right now that are running around with each other, as I say, and you got to really understand them. So there's also, keep in mind, there's employees that have pre-existing disabilities too. So that is something you need to be aware of, what those existing situations are. And during all this, you have to be very, very careful about keeping the confidentiality. So that's very important. So have those resource policies in place. And as I mentioned, here are some of those new ones that are really confusing many right now. Yet they've been pounding it over and over to us, after the past few weeks, but it is a little difficult understanding some of this and how they play with each other. So I just mentioned the Families First Corona Response Act, which is pretty much where, if I go back, that's where we bring in all this. So that first one we all heard about was that 80 hours emergency paid leave. Also part-time employees are under this. So that's, I think a lot of people understand what this is all about at this time, but again, this went in effect in April 1, and you want to keep in mind too that it expires December 31st, 2020, and no earned paid leave will carry over to 2021. So I just want to mention that also. This act, in addition to, and does not diminish other paid leaves available under any union contracts or employer policies and other federal, state, and local laws. So keep that in mind with that. So there's a lot of detail in all this. You can find all these regulations online, but you want to keep them in mind as you also go into the family medical leave, this new one also. So on March 18th, we have this new paid leave in addition to the FMLA protection, and that also became effective. And again, all this is on these posters. Make sure they're available to all your employees. And whoops, that's some question answer. So something to keep in mind with this, and I'm getting a lot of questions on this too. How does it work? It does come in play where the family medical leave, there's the federal, then you've got the state. And this new one covers all employees 500 and under. It also covers employees that have been employed for 30 days. And so that one is big, because often in any federal or state, you have to have so many hours of work that are up to about a year. And this one does not have that in effect. It's actually 30 days. So keep that in mind, that it just really covers pretty much just about everybody. Again, this is in effect till December 31st. And this paid leave does not provide pay for the first 10 days. but employees may at their option use any unavailable paid leave, including the 10 days of paid leave. So that's what I'm saying. These all kind of work together, and you need to really understand how one starts and if they do run concurrent. Very important note on this is covered employers. The Department of Labor may exempt an employer with fewer than 50 employees if it determines that the compliance would jeopardize the business as an ongoing concern. So more is going to come about on that, but that is something to keep in mind. Though it says all employers of 500 and under, they're also keeping, there is that point you want to keep that in mind also, because it does affect those with 50 and under. So some of the questions that I'm getting lately: can employees refuse a recall to work and still collect unemployment? In most cases, no. So, but depending on the circumstances, there's an individual may be unavailable for work due to the COVID-19. So it's possible to stay-at-home order could still be in place, or the individual may also be caring for a child. So remember that if there's still a stay-at-home order in place, that needs to be considered. And also, are they caring for a child? If an employer has any reason to believe an employee might refuse or recall for unlawful reasons, please educate the employee on the consequences of employment fraud. So I add that in there. So I get a lot of those questions because, now we're recalling people back to work. People are making extra money right now. But if the employers brought you back to work, it's time to come back to work. It can affect your claim. And unless there's other reasons that I just mentioned, and this is just some of them, so there's a few others. So that's a question I've been getting a lot of. My employer will let me work from home with pay. However, because my children are out of school, my spouse is working, I need to care for them, and it is too difficult to work from home. Do I qualify? So I need to have my kids at school in order to have me, so let's see, I'm sorry. I self-certify that I need my kids to be at school. I can't see my screen because I've got the pictures here. So, so do I qualify? So yes, keep in mind that CARES Act provides the pandemic unemployment only when child is home because of the school closure. This means once the school year is over, though, parents should rely on their customary summer arrangements to care for their children. I think many are forgetting that. So that's also a question that's been brought to my attention. So those are just some of the, bringing back people to work. And as George mentioned, I'm sure Sean's going to go into a little bit more detail, but some of us are back to work, some never left work, some are coming back to work. And it's going to be an ongoing situation constantly. So keep an eye on the laws, because they are being updated, and they do, as I said, they work together, and just keep an eye on those as you're bringing back your employees and also for yourself. So that's all I have on that. So I'm going to stop my share.
Thank you, Sherilyn. Again, I see there's a bunch of questions in the chat box. We will get to them after our last speaker. Sean, unmute and please go. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Now, the rules that I'm going to be talking about were written back in February. But just to be clear, every Friday night, the SBA gives new guidance as to how they're being interpreted. So I rely on everyone to basically go back to the banks who you got the loan. They're the ones that are going to have to certify to what is forgivable and what isn't. So they have the last say in this. But I'm just going to try and give you guidelines to what the SBA is and trying to educate the banks on what to do. So a couple things. SBA's loans to date, as of May 23rd, there's been 4.4 million loans provided, $511 billion worth of them, and there's still $138 billion still available. So the SBA is still taking loan applications. There were rumors that you had to spend all the money by June 30th. That is correct. That was the original guidance. As of literally Friday night, the SBA gave new guidance saying that the 8-week period that there's on the loan application, they provided an alternative calculation dates, which allows the pay period to now extend beyond June 30th. People believed this was coming. They were saying it was coming. It was actually provided in last week's Friday night guidance. So people can still apply for the loans today. and still use the money beyond the June 30th calculations. So what the SBA is doing is they're going to say that you have to figure out the 56-day period. It used to be the original consideration was the day you received the initial money, 56 days later, or 8 weeks. They're now saying you can use alternative deadlines. So say I got them on a Tuesday, but my first payroll cycle wasn't until the following Wednesday. It would allow you to finish the payroll cycle and then start the loan application during the next payroll cycle. So this way you didn't have to create special payroll cycles to compensate for receiving the money. Now, as to calculating what is forgivable, some people are saying, well, if I'm going to go back and I'm going to need hazard pay because I'm going to be putting myself at risk, or we'd be giving someone an incentive to come back to work. As of Friday's guidance, the SBA is saying now that those types of payments are acceptable within reason. Don't give someone a $100,000 pay bonus. That's just not going to work. So as long as it's reasonable and commensurate, you can use it to count towards the 75% forgivable part of payroll. Now, for the SBA loan to be forgivable, 75% can be used for payroll and 25% for non-payroll activities. I put here a calculation that you're going to use to determine whether the payroll part is forgivable. They're going to look at the payroll period prior to the pandemic. They're going to look at the 56 days that you're going to consider, and they're going to look at your total payroll between February 15th and June 30th. We're going to divide those two together to determine what ratios you kept in your employment. Now, there's two things to consider under the 75%. One is, did you keep the same number of employees? And then more importantly, did you keep their income the same? So it is possible that maybe not everyone wanted to come back. If that's the case, your head count will drop. If your head count drops too much, you can't get the loan forgiven because you didn't follow the guidelines. So the SBA is encouraging you that if an employee is offered work and they do not come back to work, that within 30 days of them refusing work, you need to prove in writing that they've gotten an offer, they've refused the offer, and that you have then notified the state for their unemployment qualification that they've chosen to come back to work. And it is possible at that point they can be disqualified unless they have one of the exception reasons for why they're not returning to work. If someone does qualify then as to not coming back to work, they will remove that head count so that it doesn't drop you below the ratios, and they will remove that compensation so that it doesn't affect your ratios either. So keep in mind that if someone doesn't come back to work, it's not going to wind up hurting you to determine whether you are forgivable or not. Now, for self-employed people, it's going to sound silly, but you need to pay yourself. You should give yourself 8 equal payments. That means physically writing yourself a check on the same day every week, as if it was a payroll check, if you're not already using a payroll company. Even someone says, you're saying write a check and deposit it right back in my own bank account. The answer is yes, because you're going to have to submit proof of payments and all of your compensation. Just saying you paid yourself does not constitute evidence. Even if your bank says it's fine, the SBA says it is not. The SBA has the right to review any application for forgiveness. And if they were to pull your file and you have no proof of payments, then the SBA would disqualify the forgiveness, and they would also not pay the bank. So that means the banks are going to stick to the guns, because if one of the packages are denied, the SBA will take the money back that they paid the bank in a fee for those applications. So they're going to be hopefully stringent enough to make sure that once they've agreed to it, the SBA will agree to it, and things will be smooth. So make sure that you keep those payments and keep records of them. Contractors do not constitute payroll. It was in the beginning, they determined that they were, but then they figured they could get paid twice. So any payments you make to a contractor, a 1099, does not constitute as payroll. If you have employees, non-owners of the business, healthcare, and retirement contributions count. So if you have a regular matching contribution or a group healthcare plan, anything that you pay towards those are constituted as part of your payroll expense towards the 75%. Oddly enough, the physical cost of making those payrolls, like an expense to ADP or Paychex or Paycor or Heartland, those physical fees you pay to them do not constitute payroll. In the non-payroll, you have to use 25%. It could be, if you have working from home, you can use part of some mortgage, or if you own a building, the interest only, not the principal. You're not allowed to make any prepayments. You can't fast forward paying off any other interest or debts. Rent will be supported if it comes with a valid lease. Utilities, if you have inventory and you have shipping costs, things like that, those are all part of your standard operating expenses. There's no absolute guidance, but it is believed that auto and machine leases will not be applied to part of that 25%. So if you're leasing a car under your business name or any sort of business equipment, you could argue some sort of printers, computer services like George would argue, if you lease equipment from someone, but as of now, the ESBA is not giving guidance accepting those as part of the non-payroll percentage. Doesn't mean next week they can't offer that guidance, they just haven't as of yet. For the employee retention, they're going to track the number of employees you had prior to COVID, and then the number of client employees you had on June 30th. So unless you can document that they refuse to come back to work, if you don't maintain certain ratios, then they will deny the forgivability of the loan, because the whole point was so that you can get everyone back to work. Even if they don't come to the office, you pay them to stay at home, call it vacation pay, call it whatever you'd like. Once you receive the money, either at that point or through the next payroll under the alternative calculation method, you need to start putting them back on the payroll, even if it means they make less money than they did on unemployment. You cannot wait until you start opening your business. The SBA has been very clear on that, because some businesses might not be able to open because of state regulations till long after the period is over. The SBA has released the new loan forgiveness applications. To successfully forgive the loan, someone has to complete the application and submit it back to the bank. Once it's received by the bank has 60 days to render a decision. They send that decision to the SBA. The SBA has 90 days to determine if they're going to audit that decision. Now, when do I have to submit my loan application, my forgiveness application? If you have basically 2 years, because that's how long the repayment period is. But starting September 1st of this year, you have one of two options. You have to have submitted your loan application for forgiveness, or you have to start making your insurance, payments for the loan. So my suggestion is that by May 1st or September 1st, that everyone submits their loan application so they don't have to start making payments. If you do, if for some reason you can't get the application done by then, you have to start making loan payments on the entire amount. You can then, at the end, try and argue to get the money back. They haven't had any procedures to how they're going to reclaim those funds if it turns out it was fully forgiven and you prepaid some of it. So I'd encourage everyone to not get into that situation if possible. Any monies that you haven't used by June 30th, you can return them. That way they're not held against you. So let's just say that 2 of my employees didn't come back to work and I was left with an extra $5,000 that I couldn't spend for payroll. To keep my ratios in line, I can return that $5,000. It would be like I never borrowed it, therefore it won't knock me out of compliance for the 75% and 25% rule. So you don't have to spend the money. Some people feel that they'll just hold on to it and they'll use it later. The SBA has been very clear. The money needs to be spent, incurred or paid by June 30th or during that 8-week cycle. Anything outside of that, the money has to be returned. It is not meant to be a loan used for whatever other purposes. New Jersey has gotten more money from the federal government and has allowed them to reopen the NJEDA loans, which were originally issued and ran out of money. There's adding $50 million more to that fund. In changes in the first round, they only allowed companies with 10 or fewer employees to apply. They've now upped it to 25 employees or fewer can apply to the NJEDA loan. I have not seen a loan application for that yet. The money was just granted the other day. So I don't know if there's procedures yet to how they're going to take applications. They did say it'll be on a first come, first served basis, and anyone that was put on the waiting list during the first round would automatically be the first ones in the door being considered for this new wave of money. So everyone else would now be behind those that were closed out after the first round. I know I covered a lot of material pretty fast, and there's a lot of confusion as to what happens if my employees don't come back. Can I hire other employees? Some people say the guidance is yes. I was on with one accounting firm that said, yes, you can do that. I was on with a law firm that said, no, you can't. The SBA hasn't given anything in writing on that yet. So I unfortunately can't give you an answer on that today, because the math, like I said, they're going to say that if someone doesn't come back to work, they're going to reduce that head count from the full-time employee and full-time retention calculations, which means there wouldn't be room to hire another person with that same money. So I would lean towards no, that money couldn't be used to hire another person based on that. So unless they alter the calculations, I don't think there's room for it. I guess we'll leave a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has a specific question, want to reach out to me directly, I can send you the formulas and we can do some of the math to calculate what counts. And that's it for now. Back to you, Tamara.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you to all the speakers. And now I see some questions in the chat, and we will go to them one by one. The first one is going to come from someone that sent it to me privately. I think, George, I think this is for you. What are the costs of the thermal cameras, as well as what are some of the advantages of using Microsoft Teams? And the third part of the question is, that person has heard that remote desktop was not recommended by Homeland Security. What makes yours better or different?
Okay, let's start off with the thermal cameras. Depending on the system you purchase, they have standalone tripod systems. There's a couple components to it, but it's right around 5,000. And they got larger systems that are made to do crowds and stuff bigger, and they're right around 12,000. Then you got installation, teach you how to use it. The second question was Teams. If you are a Microsoft 365 user, you get Teams automatically in your subscription. You should start using it and playing with it if you do. Perfect example is this slideshow that I presented. We put in Teams as a shared file. I would add to it, Carrie would add to it, Carrie would fix all my spelling, and then she'd give it back to me. And basically that's kind of how it works. It allows you to collaborate. With Teams, instead of using Zoom meeting like we're using now, I got the same capability in Teams. Also, as far as calendar and scheduling goes, I got one calendar to look at. It's my Outlook calendar. It has everything on it because Team links to Outlook, so it all ties together very nicely. The next question is, yes, if you use remote desktop all by itself, it hasn't been recommended a long time ago that it is a security risk. What we got to do, and it's called port 3389. And if you left that wide open on the internet, it means anybody could come in and hack it. We use remote desktop inside a VPN tunnel. A VPN tunnel is a virtual private network from your employee's home to your office. It's not the ones you buy online where you have no idea where the other end goes to. You own it, you know where both ends are at, and I could restrict people from getting into your network by saying only this, and this can get in, nobody else can in. Once the VPN tunnel is established, then we create a remote desktop session. And that's how you correctly use a remote desktop session in 2020. In the future, that's how we do it. But you're right, a few years back, they came back and they said, remote desktop, open on the network, bad idea. People are hacking it. We've seen it since we watch our customers' networks. we would see multiple brute force attacks on that port of people just submitting bogus usernames and bogus passwords and try to get in. And we shut that down for our clients quite a few years ago because we've seen it happening. We just all of a sudden see like accounts getting locked out. And then we started tracing into it. And it's like, this person's hacking the network. So we turn around, we stopped the use of it on an open. We only do it on a virtual private network tunnel. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, George. I think you're going to be a very busy person right now. It looks like a lot of these are for you, Frank. I believe you have a question for George. I'll go ahead and unmute.
Hey, George, thank you very much. It was great information. Quick question. You had mentioned your, I guess, thought that there'll likely be, more lawsuits coming in the future for employers, potentially. I'm just curious, why would there be any difference in an employer's liability with this particular illness versus any other illness that an employee can give to another employee, where I could have gone to work with the flu, a cold, whatever, and infected somebody before? Why is this seen as different in terms of liability?
Well, the court's only going to tell in the future. That was my prediction, and some of the stuff I've been reading online, where employers got to protect themselves from their employees for civil litigation. And one of the things you want to keep in mind is, if I did nothing, if I just opened my office up, made no plans, ignored all the CDC guidelines, am I negligent? Am I up to be because I did nothing that was recommended? I'm taking it the same effect as the way we protect computer systems. If I just put your computer on a network and I walk away from it and you're wide open, and whether it's today, a year from now, or 6 months from now, or whatever time frame it is, somebody breaks into your network because I didn't do the due diligence. I didn't put in today's standards of what you need to protect yourself. This is what I foresee is going to happen, is where somebody's going to get sick, somebody's going to die, and somebody's going to do a wrongful death suit, and they're going to say it came from your office because you did nothing to protect the employees. And I just think you open yourself up for liability.
And then I have a slightly different question. Is there any sense that there would be any repercussion to an employee who does not take proper precaution, i.e., should they know that they are sick versus the employer knowing they are sick?
As crazy as it sounds, with the AIDS and the HIV epidemic, if you knowingly have sex or intercourse with somebody and you're infected and you don't notify them before you have sex, you are civilly liable, and in some states, criminally liable. So I'm just applying one law from one disease, one epidemic to another. And yeah, it's a good possibility that somewhere down the line, somebody's going to do something in that nature and basically look to get a cash windfall out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beatrice, was your question answered, or did you want to add more to that?
No, it was answered. Thank you.
No problem. Our next question was from...
Cameron, just
Yeah,
real
go ahead.
quick, just to piggyback on that, because it's kind of like a lot of what HR, the field is, what that question was that
Sure, go ahead.
Frank just had. This is a pandemic, whereas it wasn't before. It's been established as a pandemic. That's one of the main, what the difference is right now. Also, you got to remember, you got the OSHA and the CDC guidelines. So, that's where it falls on the employers and to be following all those guidelines. And if they're doing those things, there's that protection. I mean, there's going to be problems, but if you're doing everything you can to keep the employees safe by all those guidelines, and I've instructed a lot of people who have asked me those questions, just make sure you got a lot of things in writing, a lot of policies. You're doing everything you can to ensure the safety.
Thank you. Sherilyn, next question is for you from Sean. How does unemployment work if the employee does not want to go back to work because of fear of getting sick or childcare issues?
So if it's childcare issues, you want to look at what I mentioned was the CARES. So you want to refer to that, and you might be eligible, the employee might be eligible under that. Eligibility depends on the different criteria that's under that act. So And I mentioned that briefly, but there's some much more detailed information on that. If they're afraid to come back, you need to have a conversation with the employee, because that's where the systems and what George, we were all talking about, where is that having those systems in place, the procedures in place, and keeping people safe. But maybe there's a reason, there's an underlying condition that could fall under the ADA. So that's where you do need to have a conversation with that employee.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. It looks like we are all on one screen. So if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand. Go ahead. Jill, I see you. Okay, hold on, Laura. Jill, go ahead.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not trying to step on your toes, Sherilyn, since you are one of our clients, more and more, and as a survivor of the September 11th event and being an employee of a company that was in the towers that day, I was part of a planning committee, and this may open the door for more and more employers to have employee handbooks that the employee has to sign for. That may open the door for that. And as far as this pandemic, there is no assistance from the insurance industry at this point. The problems and the lawsuits are going to bring about the change, but it's not going to happen by next week. It's going to happen over time. So just document, document, document. I can't stress that enough. It's very important. So just keep that in mind, and good luck, everybody, in the new wave.
Thank you, Gilda. You're not overstepping. You're absolutely right, Gilda.
Thank you.
Laura, go ahead and unmute and ask your question. All right.
Okay, so this is coming right from my boss. I'm a hairdresser, and we aren't integrated back into work yet, except for social distancing and being able to cut outside. But as far as for my employee, she's concerned about, she still has to pay 70% back on her unemployment loan starting as of June 15th. And she said she has no choice, and that she wants to put all her employees back, and we cannot collect unemployment if that is if we're not integrated back into work by 6/15. Now, I know if we're not legally able to go back to work, that's impossible, but what do you know about that situation? Because she's saying she has to pay that loan back and has no choice on the interest of all that she borrowed.
I'll fill that one. So what's going to happen is the whole point of getting the PPP loan was to get people off unemployment. So either the day she received it or through the alternative valuation date, which is the next payroll cycle, she has to start making payments to her employees. Now, those payments have to be equal to the compensation they were making prior to the COVID incident. She can't reduce the income below a certain point, or she loses the forgiveness. If enough employees are going to argue they don't want to come back to work because they're making more money on unemployment, she can return the funds. If she returns 100% of the funds, then it's not a loan, and the whole thing just kind of goes away. Now, the issue there is a lot of hairdressers I've seen operate one of two ways. They either 1099 employees to the W-2. Some argue that, because you're renting chairs, you have some independence. Others argue that they can control your schedule. So I don't know under which guides they're operating, but if they're 1099 employees, then they're not even considered as part of the payroll for the loan forgiveness. It would only be W-2 hairdressers that are being considered.
We are W-2 hairdressers in the state of New Jersey. The law is that you're not allowed to rent a chair. Now, other states are differently, but that's the law in Jersey.
I agree that's a law. I still have a dozen hairdressers I know that do pay 1099s, and they find loopholes saying it's not a rental chair, they share business, they do all that.
I only know that because I used to work with the state of cosmetology. I was on the board.
Yeah. So for the W-2 employees, they would have to come back to work, or they don't necessarily have to come back to work, but they have to get paid, even if they don't come back to work. Just because the business can't open, the SBA understands that, so they get paid to stay at home, even if it means they make less money than unemployment.
Right, because we can't go back to work if we're not allowed legally.
Right.
Can't jeopardize our license, so, all right.
No,
Thank
agreed, but the payments still have to come. Even if you're not open, then you still should be getting your W-2 paychecks on your regular paycheck cycle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. And everybody, excellent, very great information, and it helped me a lot,
Yeah.
even though I am in a different situation as you all. Thank you.
All right. If the 8 weeks run out and you're not back to work yet, you can reapply for unemployment.
Thanks, Sean. Anybody
Thank you.
else have any questions they would like to ask? Okay. I hope you guys all enjoyed today's webinar and found it very informative. Thank you to our speakers. That was fantastic.
That's great.
Tell people that you know that we are doing these webinars. They are open to everybody. You do not have to be a chamber member to be part of these webinars. So if you find these webinar Lunch and Learns valuable, please come to the next one. And that's going to let me turn to Frank, who's going to tell you what we got coming up next week and the weeks after that. Frank?
Yeah, so thank you, Sean. And thanks again to George, to Sherilyn, and to Sean for all the great information and for putting all the material together. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, so we greatly appreciate it. So for next week, Wednesday, June 3rd, normally we have these on Tuesdays, but for scheduling reasons, we have to do next week's on Wednesday, 12 to 1. There'll be a webinar on wellness, so managing anxiety and your diet in stressful times. Then the week after that, Tuesday, June 9th, will be Gilda and Tamer are going to be talking about insurance, beyond your insurance policy. And then on Tuesday the 16th, we have Claude Blanc coming back to us for a full session to talk about the power of grit, how to survive in times of crisis. So those are the 3 next webinars that are up. So hopefully you can join us for those.
Thank you, Frank. And the last piece of information for today, as always, this Friday we have our perk, and we have a great speaker, Metala Vasa will be speaking on technology and COVID. So please join us for the weekly perk this Friday. Thank you all for attending today. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you have any feedback, comments, questions, please feel free to email them to me and we will get them to the right person. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, and we hope to see you on Friday. Have a good rest of your week, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.